Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is the first session on our discussion of the War of the Ring, Volume 3 of the History of the Lord of the Rings, Volume 8. I think it's 8. Pretty sure it's 8. Yes, it is 8. Of the history of Middle-earth that we have been going through volume by volume now for the last several years. So I am excited to jump in tonight. We're going to be jumping in at one of my favorite points in the book, which is, of course, the Battle of Heorulfs Clough, which I know is everybody else's favorite too. First, let me just start off with first one sort of apology. I'm not entirely well from a physical standpoint. I have had contagion visited upon my household by my children as usual. So I'm a little bit under the weather this evening. I think I should be able to make it through okay. I think I'll be all right. But there's a non-zero chance I might have to maybe stop early or something. But we'll probably be okay. By the way, Stephen, I'm kind of guessing actually at how to pronounce Clough. I think it's Clough. It could be Clough for all I know. But it's from the Anglo-Saxon word clough, so I think it's probably Clough. Rhymes with slough, right? S-L-O-U-G-H, meaning like a swamp or mire, such as the Slough of Despond, into which Christian falls and is nearly mired at the beginning of Pilgrim's Progress. So yeah, and Tara, I know I do need to rest up for the chicken run on Saturday. I'm gonna try to recover over the next couple days, but we're pretty good. Yes, Curtis, exactly. I am saying I guess I do have a clue about how to pronounce it, but only it's a fairly tenuous one. Anyway, so welcome everybody who's joining us. It's wonderful to see such a great list of people here, and I see a bunch of new faces with us, so glad you could join us tonight. Let me start off with, and just also to mention, we're simulcasting on twitch.tv/SignumU, the Twitch channel of Signum University, so I see a bunch of people there on Twitch as well. Just to let you know, I'm going to be trying to monitor the Twitch chat as well, but I'm primarily going to be interacting with folks in the GoToWebinar chat, which is through the questions box that you submit there. Those I see in real time, so I'll be trying to get to follow that most closely. But I am also keeping an eye on the Twitch chat as well. So. Yeah, that's good. All right, so there was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. This is another problem with being sick. My wits are not at their sharpest here, so bear with me. But okay, so let's do a couple quick announcements because there are a bunch of things going on that I want to make sure to. And oh yes, Arthur, thank you for the reminder. I think that was the thing that I just forgot. On the webpage, if you go to the webpage for the War of the Ring class, on mythgard.org, go to the Academy tab and click on the page for the War of the Ring, and you will find a little bouncing icon at the bottom for a chat room. That is a separate chat room. That's the talk amongst yourselves chat room that we have always had for people who want to talk together instead of just submitting, in addition, I should say, to just submitting questions to me. Okay, so we're going to be, hey, Craig, that's great. Actually, yeah, so Craig, in this class, I'm going to try to remain, after I finish my announcements, generally focused. We're going to go through the first two chapters, really chapter 2, of the War of the Ring. So I'm going to be doing fairly close reading of that. So I'm not going to be doing a whole bunch of like free range kind of lore questions. It's a really great lore question. So save that, and best place to submit that is like during one of my Grifflet Lotro streams, or or there are other places, even exploring the Lord of the Rings. You can talk about some stuff like that, and we can get into those things. Very little we don't get around to talking about sooner or later in exploring the Lord of the Rings. But anyway, okay, so let's get to quick announcements. So first, I wanted to announce, you guys will remember last year, I talked about this last night, exploring the Lord of the Rings a little bit, but you may remember from last year, the Hobbit Camp that we did over the summer, which was our sort of our first experimental effort. It was the first time that Signum ever did a program designed for kids, a free, open, public program for middle schoolers, our Hobbit Camp last summer, and that was super fun. And the way that we set it up, it was really neat. We did it in partnership with local libraries and school groups. So we have, we do a broadcast every day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks, going through The Hobbit, talking about it, taking questions from kids and from groups of kids. But we also partner with local institutions, like especially public libraries, but as I say, also homeschool groups or other just families who joined us independently even. And to have a place where they can get together, they can either watch the classes together, a lot of people did that, or they can watch them asynchronously and get together for some discussion and extra projects and discussion and things like that. We send out a whole big packet of activities and projects and things that kids can do as they're working their way through the book to sort of kind of wrap their minds and their imaginations, really immerse themselves in The Hobbit. It was really, really fun. We had a wonderful time. And so we decided that we were going to do that again this year, except we were going to do it even better and even more. So this summer, the Signum Academy is featuring 4 different camps. So we're going to do the Hobbit Camp again, because, we kind of introduced it pretty close to the end. Last time it was too late for a lot of people to adopt it, so we wanted to give another chance for people to go through The Hobbit with us. But we're also adding 3 other camps this year. We're adding Potter Camp, Narnia Camp, and Madeline L'Engle Camp. So we're doing A Wrinkle in Time, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in addition to The Hobbit. And you can see on this page here the dates for the different camps. There's some overlap. We're not able to. We wanted to kind of stay within a particular range here of dates, but which is kind of tricky, especially given how different people in different parts of the country start school at different times and stuff. But we tried to do the best we could and hope that people have an opportunity to do at least one camp that you will find fun. And of course, people are welcome to participate in more than one. These are absolutely free, so there is no charge to families to be involved in this. There's no charge to the kids. There's no charge for libraries either. It's free to everybody. So we are really excited about this. Rachel, great. Yeah, great to hear that your kids loved it last year. Oh, good. So they're going to do Harry Potter? Really neat. Really neat. So this is going to be really fun. If you have any questions about the program and how it works or how you can sign up, we've got this convenient button here. You can just send us an email to ask about this. We encourage you, if you want to take part, just register your group and we'll be in touch with you. So it should be really fun. I encourage you to tell your local library about this. Again, this costs nothing for the libraries, and we do pretty much all the work, right? All they have to do is have a space for kids to come to their library and talk about books and get excited about thinking about some of these really fun books over the summer. So that is usually a kind of thing that libraries and librarians are supportive of. So here, let me post the direct link. Actually, hang on a second. Let me post the direct link to everybody here, and let me post it here on Twitch as well. Just make sure everybody who is watching live can have that. All right, there we go. Actually, I think that we even put in a cunning. Yeah, look at that. Moobot has that in Twitch. That's pretty cool. Anyhow, so this should be this should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to this. So I hope that you'll spread the word. We've got a lot of information on this page, talking about how it's supposed to work and having some Q&A down at the bottom. And, this should really be, this page should include all the information that, your local library needs. So just, send your librarian to this page and see if they would be interested in signing up. We would, the more the merrier. We'd love to share that. Yeah, and the direct email address for the contact is camp@signumu.org if you want to contact us about that. So that is my first announcement. These are going to be really great. I loved the Hobbit Camp last year. It was such a rewarding experience, and I am delighted that we're able to expand it this year. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is something I've been talking about a lot because it's one of the big programs that we are working on this year, which is our regional Moots. We are expanding our regional events. We've had MythMoot, and MythMoot is awesome. It is fantastic. It is our flagship event. It is our biggest event. It is a 4-day conference and just the coolest place with the coolest group of people you'll ever spend a weekend with. But, I know that not everybody can make it to MythMoot every year, and it's not easy for everybody to travel. MythMoot is in Leesburg, Virginia, and I know that location isn't exactly convenient to everybody. So we've started our program of regional Moots, having events at different places around the country, just little one-day events. It's not like MythMoot. They're very inexpensive. Generally, the cost to attend is, $25, maybe $30 at most for the whole day. So the price is really reasonable. We try to make them as convenient as we can for lots and lots of people. So anyway, it's a really exciting set of events. We've had our first few of them. We've got a bunch more planned and coming up. We're working on upcoming events in Los Angeles, the San Francisco Bay Area, in North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Denver, in New England, lots of places. There are also other places that we're really interested in, and most of these events are run by. We have an events team who does a wonderful job in helping everybody get prepared. But in order for us to make a regional Moot happen, one of the major things that we need is a local volunteer, somebody who would be interested in helping to make it happen. We really kind of need somebody on the ground in the area. And then if we have a volunteer, we have a whole template of basically how this works and what needs to be done, and we are ready to provide all the support that our volunteers need to help to make the events happen. And it's been really, really neat. If you are living there are a couple places where if you're living in one of the areas that I just mentioned and would like to be involved in maybe contributing to planning one of those events, let me know. If you are there are a couple other areas that I'm really interested in establishing events in, and which we're still in the early stages of planning for that, and I'm especially interested to locate volunteers for. And those would be Toronto, Florida, Seattle, and Australia or New Zealand. I would love to have a New Zealand Moot. That would be that's been something I've been wishing for about 10 years. But again, I'd love to see if we could connect somebody down there. Stephen, yeah, so great to meet you at Tex Moot. We just had our Texas regional Moot in January, which was our second one ever. That will be really cool. Yeah, James, we're definitely planning New England. We're thinking autumn, because who doesn't like autumn in New England, right? It's fantastic, and it's the greatest time to be up here. And so, James, I'm thinking probably I'm sort of looking at Amherst, Massachusetts, basically somewhere kind of central, not too hard to get to from Boston, but also easy to pop up from New York. So that's kind of the hope. Yeah, Kiwi Moot, exactly, Curtis. That's just what I'm kind of hoping for. So, Jim, we're not actually going to come to Atlanta, but we are going to come to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is only just a little bit up the road from you guys. So that's one of the. I mean, I know we can't visit every city in the country, but we are trying to find places where we have connections with local people who can help us organize, and we're trying to do those strategically so that we reach as many major metropolitan areas as we can. So. So cool. And London, of course. Yeah, I forgot about London. Of course, that's that. Well, actually, I didn't quite forget. I was saving that one for the end. London Moot. Is, we've been really. I'm so psyched that we're finally going to get to Europe and be able to hang out with some of our European friends that we've never been able to do that really with. We've sort of, by the nature of our, my time zone and everything, I know we've always neglected our European friends. So I'm very excited. We're having our first regional moot over in Europe. We're holding it in London Moot, which is going to be, it's coming up soon, April 28th. That's our next our next on the schedule moot, and that's going to be really great. Yana, so glad you're going to be able to come out for the weekend. Yeah, that's going to be neat. So, and Stephanie, you're going to help at Charlotte Moot. Fantastic. That's excellent. Yeah, Charlotte should be great. Yeah, and we're thinking probably, Stephanie, November for Charlotte. I'm excited to go down south, just like we did Texas in January, right? I'm excited to travel down south when it's really cold up here in New Hampshire. So, anyway, and we are, Veronica, we're totally coming to the San Francisco Bay Area. In fact, probably Oakland in August is what we're looking at. Actually, August of this year, August 2018. We are finalizing date for that, but we'll be able to announce that soon. That's totally happening, Veronica. It's going to be great. But anyway, yeah. So see, isn't this cool, Veronica? This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm so excited about. I can't wait to. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling, this year and next year, and kind of doing the rounds. And I'm so looking forward to getting to meet people and to get to meet so many of you that I've been interacting with online for so many years. So that's going to be really cool. Anyway, so. But again, if you're interested in volunteering, send an email to info@signumu.org just to let us know that you'd be interested in volunteering. As I said, especially if you're like in the Orlando/Tampa area, or if you're in the Seattle area, or if you're in New Zealand, that would be especially cool. So just to somebody was asking for, because I did rip through the cities rather quickly. So the other places that we haven't, I'll give you the full list of places either that we are definitely planning or places that we're kind of working towards. And they are, let me see if I can do them all: Los Angeles, San Francisco Bay, Seattle, Texas, Denver, Kansas City. I did forget that one. Yeah, Kansas City. Orlando, Tampa, Florida. I would love to do a Florida moot. Charlotte, North Carolina. New England, Toronto, and then New Zealand and London are our two international moots. So, anyway, yeah, so, Yana, I wonder if we might, it's one thing that we've already done. So, for instance, the Kansas City moot this year, that's our Midwest moot, which is kind of migrating a little bit. We were in Iowa last year, which was really neat, and, people were able to come from bunches of different directions. We're sort of migrating down to Kansas City this year. So some of our other moots might, as they go into their annual cycles, they might kind of shift around from one city to another in a region. So see, Jim, it's not impossible. Maybe the southeast one will shuffle down to Atlanta at some point. Who knows? You're right, Curtis. Toronto, of course, is international as well. Here, I'm not giving it credit for being one of our international moots, but. Anyway, yeah, so it would be cool. So Yana, maybe next year our European moot can migrate down towards Amsterdam or something. That'd be neat. That'd be neat. We'll see what we can do. But yeah, anyway, so that's the plan. So let me know if any of you guys would be interested in doing that. Most of those are actually on the schedule, are likely to happen. We're looking at holding at least eight different regional moots in this calendar year, in 2018, and then expanding to something like 10 to 12 in 2019. So it's been a really exciting time as we've been getting those together. And again, I just can't wait for the opportunity to be traveling around and seeing everybody. I've had such a good time at the regional moots we've done so far. Okay, and one last announcement, relatively quick announcement, and this is actually focused for Mythmoot, and it's targeted especially at people who have already signed up for Mythmoot. Just to point out, this is our Mythmoot event page, which if you've signed up already, you've probably seen before. Mythmoot, gonna be awesome. John Garth, Douglas Anderson, Mark Ockran, inventor of Klingon. It's gonna be great. But the main thing I want to draw your attention to is the lodging bit at the bottom. We have a link now for registering for rooms. There's been a kind of a delay in registering for rooms. I strongly recommend, if you're coming to Mythmoot, that you do book a room at the venue. The discount rate that they have is way cheaper than you'll find at almost any hotel competitor in the area. And anyway, like, all the cool kids are staying on campus, and you'll be able to kind of be right there and right in the middle of everything. I loved that element of this venue last year. It was my favorite part. So anyway, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that. And again, if you've not checked it out, if you've not looked at the Mythmoot 5 stuff, Mythmoot 5 is going to be absolutely awesome. Leesburg, Virginia, 21st to 24th of June, our big annual conference of the year. So anyway, so yeah, Arthur, you can totally hang with the cool kids. I saw that you registered this afternoon, Arthur. That was cool. I saw that come in. I was excited. Looking forward to meeting you guys in person. Again, I know I've met you before, but it'll be cool to spend the weekend there. All right. So let's that's it. Those are all my announcements. Let's get to the text here. So, all right. So, from the Treason of Isengard, Christopher Tolkien leaps straight into the War of the Ring with very little preamble. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Chapter 1, which is where he's kind of going through the chronology thing. Chapter 1 seems to be basically Christopher Tolkien's explanation for why he's not I mean, one of the major things, of course, that you can see, especially if we compare back to The Return of the Shadow, right? One of the things you notice when you look at the table of contents of the War of the Ring is that it proceeds in what looks like a really linear fashion, right? Sort of one chapter at a time, marching its way kind of pretty much through the text of the plot of the Lord of the Rings, right? Now, partly, of course, that's because the story is in a different kind of place than it was before, right? In The Return of the Shadow, when the whole thing was a brand new adventure, and I don't mean Bingo's adventure, I mean Tolkien's adventure, right? Not even knowing what he was writing or where it was going at all. But anyway, you'll remember in The Return of the Shadow, we got all those phases, right? And we'd follow the narrative from the beginning, from chapter 1 all the way through up to where Tolkien stopped and then started again, and then we go through and do it again, and then we go through and do it again. You notice that Christopher Tolkien's not doing that anymore. And so that first chapter is where he primarily explains just basically that it's kind of too complicated to do that. And so much of the revision of Tolkien's revision is driven by the need to coordinate to maintain the consistency of his storylines and to coordinate the timelines, right? Because there's so many different elements. Often we sort of think about the ways that the big splits of the story, right? The company that goes out into Rohan, and then Frodo and Sam go. So we get the book 3 stuff and the book 4 stuff, right? As Frodo and Sam go to Mordor while the rest of the company is in Rohan doing big things. And then, of course, it further splits when we get into book 5, right, in the first half of The Return of the King, where we've got Merry with the Rohirrim, and we've got Pippin and Gandalf down in Minas Tirith, and of course we've got Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli kind of off the radar for a long time, right, down as they are traveling the paths of the dead and coming up from the south. And of course, still, while all that's going on, we still have Frodo and Sam going to Mordor. So but of course, we're not even anywhere near there yet. Long before there, as Christopher Tolkien is illustrating in chapter 1, he's having an issues just balancing everything that we, even just like what's supposed to be going on at Isengard, right? What the Ents are doing when the Huorns get to Helm's Deep, and when they get back to Isengard, and how quickly Theoden and Aragorn and Gandalf and the Rohirrim get to what will eventually be called Helm's Deep. So all that stuff is Christopher says was really the driving force behind a lot of Tolkien's revisions here. So instead of trying to do the whole thread, in regular waves, the way that he gave it earlier on, he's just kind of giving it to them. He's just kind of giving it to us in chunks, right, and walking us through the different revisions, and not so. On the one hand, we kind of lose something here, right? And Christopher acknowledges that and sort of apologizes for that. But I do want to kind of pause for a second to acknowledge what we're losing, right? And what we're losing is that sense of horizontal layers that we could get. And I did really enjoy that. I was very interested, especially in the early stages. But even at the later stages too, even in the Treason of Isengard, seeing where, okay, like at this moment, right, at this particular moment in Tolkien's development of the story, what is the story that he's seeing, right? And how is it different from the story that he's left behind, and, what haven't we added yet, right? But, I know that Christopher talks about he talks explicitly about how it would take way, way too much space to try to present this material in that way. But also, he kind of acknowledges, though he doesn't emphasize quite as much, that it's also really kind of impossible. I mean, Tolkien's manuscripts are such a mess because when Tolkien revised them, he tended to do things like write in pen on top of the penciled manuscript that he'd already written, right? And also like just go in and add bits here and there and cross out names and change them to something else. And it's often really hard to tell what changes go with what. And so the idea that we can, what I'm saying is I think it's just as well that that Christopher's kind of abandoned that, because it does seem at this point like it's kind of too difficult to really maintain that in any kind of really plausible way. And maybe not. I think that it's I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody could do some even more amazing work with the manuscripts, but still, I think that this is pretty defensible. So, anyway, having sort of acknowledged that, let's look at the Battle of Helm's Deep and how it emerges. Because I don't know about you, but I thought the Battle of Helm's Deep, as it was described in the earlier drafts, was awesome. I love the original Battle of Helm's Deep, actually. And I have to say, there are a bunch of things from the original Helm's Deep that I am really kind of sad didn't make it into the published text. I really would have liked to see some of those things retained, but we'll get to that. It is far more detailed in military tactics. You are absolutely right. It's one of the things that I found so striking about it. And it's interesting to me because it's clear that Tolkien was himself kind of interested in the military tactics, right? You can see this, especially, you can see it really, really clearly in Unfinished Tales, right? Read the description of the disaster at the Gladden Fields, right? The Elendil's battle with the orcs. He is very interested in the tactical situation, and not only that, but in sort of like the standard tactical doctrines of the Númenóreans in battle, right? We get so much of that in that book, or even more so, his description of the Battle of the Fords of Isen, also in Unfinished Tales, right? When we get the much more detailed description. So Yana, it's interesting to see he does think that way, right? He does but you're right that in most of his published work, he doesn't do that. And his battles, the battles in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are pretty famously bare of, tactical discussion generally. So yes, the original, did I say it wrong, Tony? Isildur, of course, is what I meant at the Battle of Gladdenfield. I think Tony was correcting me. I probably said it wrong. But anyway, yeah. So it is interesting that the original Battle of Helm's Deep was so much more tactically detailed. Yeah. But anyway, okay. So let's look at how this developed. We got through, at the end of the Treason of Isengard, we just got through the King of the Golden Hall, right? We got the liberation of Theoden from the influence of Wormtongue and of Saruman. And so we have, one of the things that strikes me right away about the narrative that we see is that the first thing clearly that Tolkien has worked out is the story, right? He has the overall plot. Everything else is still fluid, right? Everything from big picture geography to names to the sort of political history of Rohan, all of these things are in flux, right? But the one thing he has is the story. Because, of course, we see that, we recognize these major points right away. Theoden, with Éomer and Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Gandalf, right, riding off to the east, but they're not heading straight up towards Isengard, right? They're heading off to the east, and then they meet the one soldier, right, in this exchange that that he has with Éomer, but of course with Theoden, and then they end up in Helm's Deep. Like, the overall outline of the story is almost exactly the same as it's going to be. That seems to have really emerged fairly fully formed for him. And what we see happening is the world building going on around the story, right? So, look what I mean here. He came, a weary man with dented helm and cloven shield. Slowly he climbed from his horse and stood there a while, panting. At length he spoke. "Is Éomer here?" he asked. "You come at last, but too late and too few. Things have gone evilly since Theodred fell. We were driven back over the bend of the Isen with great loss yesterday. Many perished at the crossing. Then at night fresh forces came over the river against our camp. All Isengard must be emptied, and the wizard has armed the wild hillmen and scattered folk of Westfold, and these also he loosed upon us. We were overmastered. The shield wall was broken. Trumbold, changed to Heorulf, the West Marcher, has drawn off those he could gather towards his fastness under Tin Toras. Others are scattered. Where is Éomer? Tell him there is no hope ahead. He should return to Eodoras, which it still was, before the wolves of Saruman come there." So, yeah, Tony says, plot first, then characters, then themes. Yeah, plot first, right? Even the geography is filling in around it. Notice there's no Dunland yet, right? The wild men live in Westfold. Westfold is not yet a part of the Mark. That's pretty clear. The name Dunland is sometimes used, though Christopher says it's often inserted in maps and in the margins and stuff to suggest that it's a late name. It's a late concept. Throughout this, it's Westfold, which is the home of the wild men, the men who have been displaced by the men of the Mark and the men who hold this grievance, which Saruman has inflamed and recruited them to be his allies. But notice even just the sort of, I don't know, kind of looming political situation that Tolkien seems to be imagining, even just with the title, Heorulf the West Marcher, right? He, on the one hand, of course, that means he who is in the West March, right? The western border of the Mark, which is clear enough, right? But given that the wild men they're wild hillmen and scattered folk in the Westfold, the West Marcher is a pretty important position, right? And this idea that he is the one who he's the one who marches in the West, right? He is the one whose job is he takes the West March and he makes it an action. Like it's an action, right? Being in the West March that's an active role, right? It's not just a spot, right? It's a career being the West Marcher, and you can sort of see that conflict much more kind of interestingly here, but we don't get. There's still a lot of stuff that we don't really understand. The geography. Where are they going exactly? Right? So Trumbold or Heorulf or whoever, the West Marcher, has a fastness under Tind Taurus. Okay, so that's a mountain in the Black Mountains. The White Mountains are still the Black Mountains, right? So you've got the Black Mountains in the south and the Misty Mountains, and the Gap of Rohan is between them. Isengard is up on the Misty Mountain end of the Gap of Rohan, so they're down on the southern end. They're on the opposite side of the gap from Isengard, as in the published text and with the published map as well. But okay, so we've got some kind of a fastness there. Let's see. And Tony, that's a fantastic question. Tony is wondering whether the wolves of Saruman are literal or metaphorical. I think they're literal because there's reference to wolf riders still around in this text. So I think it is literal. But it's a great question, actually, because wolf is used metaphorically just for like outlaws and brigands very frequently in Anglo-Saxon. That's a very common thing. I mean, that's where I mean, if you've read, for instance, the Children of Húrin, either the unfinished tales version of the Narni Hín Húrin or the more recently published Children of Húrin, illustrated by Alan Lee, you may remember the Gauradine, right, the Wolfmen, and they're just called that because they're brigands. They're wanderers and brigands who prey upon people like wolves. So that's a very common thing. So it is interesting, Tony. There do seem to be literal wolves about, and yet I'm not sure that when the guy says this, before the wolves of Saruman come there, I'm not sure that he's thinking of the wolves, actually, when he says that. I think that's a great point. All right. Forward they rode again, urging on their horses. Suddenly Gandalf spoke to Shadowfax, and like an arrow from the bow the great horse sprang away. Even as they looked, he was gone, a flash of silver in the sunset, a wind in the grass, a shadow that fled and faded from sight. For a while, Snowmane and the horses of the King's Guard strained in pursuit, but if they had walked, they would have had as much chance of overtaking him. "What does that mean?" said Hama to a comrade. "Ever he comes and goes unlooked for." "Wormtongue, were he here, would not find it hard to explain," said the other. "True," said Hama, "but for myself I will wait till we see him again." "If we ever do," said the other. Now, of course, there is a remnant of this exchange in the published text, but notice the significance of this in this text, right? First of all, the first major difference between this and the published text with which we're familiar is Gandalf doesn't say anything. He just takes off, right? And they're riding together. I mean, this is not like they're stopped and then he just takes off. Like, they're all riding, and then Gandalf suddenly says something to Shadowfax, and then boom, he's off, right? And the other horses are trying to keep up. They're like trying, but they just fall back and they can't do anything, right? Yeah, Josiah, Gandalf is not a tame wizard. Absolutely not. The inexplicability of Gandalf's action, right? What I'm interested in here is not necessarily asking why would Gandalf do this? Why would not Gandalf do what he ends up doing in the published text, right? Which is actually turning to Theoden and explaining and saying, all right, I'm going to go, I'll meet you at Helm's Deep. He just takes off, right? And John, yeah, spontaneity is a good word to use to describe it, John. That seems perfectly perfectly just. again, to me, the interesting thing here is not just trying to figure out why Gandalf would act like this. Josiah, actually, I kind of feel like your answer is it satisfies me, right? Gandalf is not a tame wizard, right? Gandalf Greyhame has need of haste, right? So off he goes. He doesn't need to explain his business to anybody. Rather, the emphasis, the significance of Gandalf's departure and the emphasis of the passage is the need of the Rohirrim to have faith in Gandalf, right? I'm not saying that Gandalf is deliberately testing their faith, but this situation becomes a test of their faith, and that's indeed what we see dramatized. And interestingly, not in Theoden, right, or in Éomer, or one of the leaders, but just in two comparatively minor figures, right? Hama and some unnamed dude. Right, the unnamed dude, certainly a very minor figure. Hama, not completely obscure, but not one of the captains. Right. But anyway, yeah. So this is a situation. The situation here looks easily fishy, right? What is he doing? Is he betraying them? Is he leaving? Is he fleeing? Right? Maybe he's running away. Maybe he's saving himself and leaving them all to die. The thing that the unnamed comrade says here, Wormtongue, were he here, would not find it hard to explain, is really, I think, is very well said, right? Because it's not even that he's putting a particular turn on it, right? It's not that he's interpreting it in a particular, unattractive way. He's just pointing out really about how easy would it be for Wormtongue to make hay out of this situation, right? I mean, it's easy to come up with any one of several really unattractive explanations for why Gandalf is acting this way. And yet, in the face of that, really, indeed, it's much easier to explain it negatively than positively, really. It's easier to lose the faith in Gandalf than to keep faith in Gandalf. But Hama remains steadfast, and here Hama seems to be, I wouldn't call him the voice of the people, but he does seem to be the voice of his master, right? He's like the little voice of Theoden here. We don't need to hear from Theoden here. Hearing from Hama is enough, I think. Brandon and Arthur are both interested in the reference to Wormtongue, in the sense that Arthur was saying, is that, are we supposed to hear that Wormtongue is actually popular with the common soldier here? I don't know if that's what we're supposed to be understanding, that there is some kind of popular support for Wormtongue. I mean, on the one hand, I would say that logically speaking, Wormtongue can't have been entirely universally suspected and hated by everybody. He can't have been. If he had been, he never would have succeeded. Right? He has to have had some kind of power, not just over the king, right? Because as the king was failing, he would need the support of others to keep somebody like Éomer and Theodred from stepping in, right? So logically speaking, there has to have been a Wormtongue faction in Rohan. I mean, I can't imagine that there wouldn't have been that. Lynn is wondering if he's misled the populace as he misled the king. Well, Lynn, that's exactly the thing to keep in mind, right? I mean, he's called Wormtongue, and that's not just an insult. Remember, and I know I've said this many times, but remember that Wormtongue Gandalf will make a joke about him being a witless worm. But he's not a Wormtongue in the sense of an earthworm. He's a Wormtongue in the sense of a dragon tongue. And dragons are, of course, very persuasive. Remember that dragons tend to have rather overwhelming personalities. And it is in that sense that Grima is called the Wormtongue. I think that nickname it's critical. The people who despise him, clearly they call him that, right, and mean no good by it. But they mean no good by it because of the often wicked hearts and intentions of dragons, right? But at the same time, there is a kind of acknowledgement of his power in that, right? To say that he has the tongue of a worm is a compliment. It's not a moral compliment. It's not a compliment to his character, right? But it is a compliment to his powers, to his abilities, right? He has to be taken seriously, right? And so, yeah, Josiah, his whispers were not for Theoden's ears alone. We know that, right? And of course, as Gandalf suggests later on in the Houses of the Healing, Éowyn also has been influenced by Wormtongue, right? And it's not just, now we know that she is a particular target of Wormtongue, just as Theoden, and for a different reason than Theoden was. But there is no reason to think that there aren't many people in Rohan, even again like masses of people, who have not come under the sway of the power of his voice, right? The power of his persuasion. And Kate, you're absolutely right that Theoden even does afterwards acknowledge the wisdom of Grima as a counselor. He was revealed to be faithless, but again, that doesn't, he still says, I miss both my counselors, right? The old and the new. He acknowledges that Grima wasn't just rubbish as a counselor, right? He was wise. He was good. But yeah. Carrie Gross says, he infiltrated an entire palace of warriors and strategists. He can't have been unlikable. No, definitely not. Definitely not. Again, I think that this is something that, if we could just kind of imagine Grima as just this outside figure coming in and having this, sort of putting the king in this thrall, right, into this thraldom, and then, using that to, I think, for instance, the sort of, like the decree that Theoden, I'm thinking of the film here, right? How, in the movie version, the king issues a decree banishing Éomer, right? Which is like this very transparent, stratagem on Grima's part. And he's just, baldly exerting his own power over his rivals through Theoden, right? There's a reason Wormtongue didn't try to banish Éomer, right? It wouldn't have worked. Éomer wouldn't have gone. Had it been, we see in the book, he threatens death to Grima in the hall, right? With much less provocation than he would have had Grima had him beaten up and then banished, as he does in the film. So yeah. John Caldwell is thinking of similarities between Wormtongue and Rasputin. That's actually a really interesting comparison. I do think that, I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but yeah, I think there are definitely some apt parallels between the two. Yeah. And Tony, he probably was not some kind of hunchbacked weirdo either. I agree. I think I would imagine, I totally get why they did what they did in the film with Wormtongue, but if it were me, like if the Amazon people ask me how they should depict Wormtongue in their version, I would depict him as gorgeous and charismatic. I think that he should be a heartthrob, frankly. Yeah. Jim, yeah, that's another really interesting comparison. Iago is another really interesting comparison. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. Yeah, Rachel says he should look fairer and feel fouler. Yep, I agree. That's just how I would make him. And I agree, Nancy, the only detail we're told is that he had a pale, wise face, right? Okay. Pale, but hot, right? I'm fine with that. I think we can make that work. I see Demigod there on Twitch is comparing Wormtongue to Lord Peter Baelish in Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah, no, more so. I mean, I think he's closer to Rasputin than to Littlefinger, but yeah, I mean that same kind of category. Yeah. Jennifer Pope wants to cast Kenneth Branagh as Wormtongue. I'm down. Right? I mean, imagine Kenneth Branagh being able to put Wormtongue, Grima Wormtongue, next to his other appearances. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Anyway, okay. All right. But anyway, so back to relevance here. I don't think that the comment about Wormtongue that Hama's unnamed companion makes necessarily means that he's totally in Wormtongue's camp, right? I don't think that we must interpret it that way. He could simply be saying, he is clearly the voice of, well, I was going to say caution, but it's not exactly caution, right? He's the voice of, I don't know what, I guess, I don't know, negativity. Yeah, Steven says he's not so much pro-Wormtongue as anti-Gandalf. Yeah, skepticism, that's fair. Yeah, skepticism. He's the voice of skepticism, right? And he just points out, Wormtongue would not find it hard to explain, right? And I think that even, the hint there is like, you wouldn't have to be Wormtongue, right? Like, it needs no Wormtongue to come up with an explanation, which looks pretty bad for Gandalf here, right? Yeah. And Gandalf is a wizard. Kate, that is a really wonderful point. If there's one thing that the people of Rohan have now fully understood, it's that the wizard is their enemy, right? And how far can they trust this other wizard guy, right? They don't know him. They've seen him sometimes, right? But he's not had a great reputation. And he has delivered Theoden, right? But of course, again, Wormtongue would not find this hard to explain, right? What has he actually done? Oh, wait, what he actually did was lure Theoden out with not an overwhelming military force into the open field, in the middle of the night, against a superior force, and then abandon them, right? I mean, you could do it doesn't take much to think of Gandalf is to Theoden and his army here what Gollum was to Frodo and Sam in Shelob's lair, right? He's just leading them into a trap and then taking off, once the trap has been sprung. That could easily be how this looks, right? Even, of course, Yana, as you say, acknowledging the fact that the two wizards look alike. They're very it's easy to think that the two of them are working together. Yana, could they even be the same person, right? I mean, one could imagine one of the Rohirrim wondering that, right? Yeah. And Tony, as you say, they don't have a lot of trust in magic and magical things anyway. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jim, of course, Jim is pointing out the obvious fact that he's a white wizard, right? So he's Saruman's replacement, right? Except I'm your friend. You can totally trust me. Absolutely. So yeah, those are all very, very important. But anyway, so just notice in this passage how much more those issues are emphasized, right? How much deeper in doubt, or at least in potential doubt, the Rohirrim are left here, right? And obviously one of the consequences of this, it's going to mean that the final return of Gandalf and the miraculous shift at the end of the battle with the appearance of the wood, the wizardry, as everyone is going to call it, is going to look far more dramatic, right? The vindication of faith is going to be far more extreme in this version. So it's interesting that to emphasize that was one of Tolkien, seems to be one of Tolkien's first impulses here. All right. The scouts rode back and reported that wolf riders were abroad in the vale. See, there's our literal wolves. And that a host of orcs and wild men, very great indeed, was hastening southward over the plain to gain the gates of the Nurwet. The Nurwet, it means narrow opening, right? So it just means the opening of the deep, right? Of the Clough. All right. We have found some of our men slain as they fled, said one of the scouts, and scattered companies we have met, going this way and that, leaderless, but many are making for Heorulf's hold, and they say that Heorulf is already there. We had best not give battle in the dark, nor await the day here in the open, not knowing the number of the coming host, said Éomer, who had ridden up to the king's side. What is your counsel, Aragorn? To drive through such enemies as are before us, and encamp before the Nurwet gate, to defend if may be, while the men who have fought rest behind our shield. Okay. Yeah, Tony, I really like the term Nurwet as well. I don't know, maybe it's just me. There are some of the names associated here that Tolkien was trying out that I am not such a big fan of, but I like Nurwet. I kind of enjoy that too. But anyway, okay, so one thing. This is the first passage that I wanted to give to sort of illustrate one of the factors that I found most interesting about the first draft of the Battle of Helm's Deep, and that is there is a much more of a sense of immediacy to it. The Battle of Helm's Deep in the published text, a lot of it takes, like, it kind of divides between giving this big sort of overview description of the battle, right? You are kind of flying in a helicopter watching the movement of armies through a lot of the description that we get in the published Battle of Helm's Deep, especially in these early stages. And that, of course, is sort of punctuated by these individual, moments like, Legolas and Gimli counting, or, Éomer and Aragorn's charge in front of the gate, or, the fight with the orcs who have crawled through the culvert, right? All of those things. So those sort of individual incidents are kind of strung together to give us a sense of the flow of the battle, but a lot of what the narrator tells us is really focused on this, like, really, really big picture. One of the impressions that I get much more powerfully in this early version of it is a much more kind of ground level sense of, like, what it would have been like to be there at the Battle of Helm's Deep. So even here, the fact that they are racing to the gates of the Nurwet in order to beat the enemy there, like, what is the enemy doing? The enemy isn't coming after them. The enemy isn't just marauding, right, and burning everything. They are burning everything that they can find, but that's not just what they're doing, right? They're not just wandering about. They are racing to they have a plan, right? They're hastening southward to gain the gates of the Nurwet, because they know that's a stronghold. If their army can get there first, then they can cut off the king and prevent him being able to hole himself up there behind the Nurwet gate, in the Clough, in the deep, right? So they're trying to get there. This fact that they might get trapped in the open in the dark, I never really feel that in the published text. Like, that there was a chance, had they not hastened, had they not made it, they would have been cut off in the open. There's even very little sense in the published text that they have a hard time finding their way in the dark, right? The fact that it's a dark night is a huge factor which Tolkien keeps coming back to in these early drafts, right? When Theoden breaks them up into smaller companies and has each one of them guided by someone who is night-sighted and someone who knows the land, right? Because I mean that's the only advantage that they have, and that's why they split up, because they'll be able to move faster. And if they each have their own guide, they're more likely to all make it there in time than if they're in this long strung out line slowly getting there. They're going to get beaten to the Nerwet by the enemy, and that would be catastrophe. They'd be caught in the open and cut to pieces. And then that kind of thing kept going. Before we look at more of the tactical situation, though, look at the description. We get the description another time here, his description of the Clough. Watch what happens the second time. On its further western side, the Tin Taurus, the Tin Taurus, right, there are 3 peaks, were hidden in darkness. The Tin Taurus are what are called the 3 Hurin in the published text. Anyway, beneath their feet, or changed to beneath the peaks, some miles away, lay the opening of the great cleft in the hills, which men of that land called Heorulfs Clough. Changed to lay the green coombe, out of which opened a great cleft in the hills. Men of that land called it Helm's Deep, after some hero of ancient wars who had made his refuge there. So now notice Heorulf is shifting, right? Heorulf was the West Marcher before, the current captain of the West March, whose current fortress, whose current place of power is there in the Clough. Now Tolkien is shifting to think maybe that guy, maybe Heorulf, is a hero of old wars, a hero of ancient wars even, right? So he seems to be kind of uncertain which way to go there. Ever steeper and narrower it wound inward under the Tin Taurus, till the crow-haunted cliffs on either side towered far above and shut out the light. Where it issued in the vale, upon added Stanrock, an out-jutting heel of land, was built the fastness of Helm's Gate. There Heorulf the Marcher had his hold. So there are 2 things that we can see happening as he describes this and sort of continues to fill out the details of this. One is simply more precise detail, right? Now how we're getting the Nerwet, right? We get the opening, and then, and then behind it, the sort of the fairly steep slope up, in the green comb. And then there's this out-jutting heel of land, right, that comes out from the cliff, and that's called the Stanrock, right? And there's a fastness on top of that, and there's the deeping wall, right? Not yet really quite clearly there, but anyway, we're getting some more detail. But that's not the main thing that I find cool, right? The 2 things that seem to me most significant here are the way in which when he goes through this a second time, we get 2 really cool sort of mythic touches that we didn't get before. And you can begin to see Tolkien kind of fleshing out his imagination of this, right? Not just the technical details, right? Not just the tactical situation, not just the geography, but the story, right? One is the hero of ancient wars. That's new, right? So that this, we're going to give this some, that there's going to be some kind of story, right? There's going to be some kind of mythic significance to this. Long before he has any clue what the myth is, right? Maybe it's Heorulf. Obviously, we have no idea who Heorulf really is yet, right? But what we know is there's going to be some kind of association with a hero of ancient wars, right? So some kind of mythic resonance gets added to it. And the other thing is what Mike and Nancy were both noticing there, the single word crow-haunted, right? That's good. Till the crow-haunted cliffs on either side towered far above and shut out the light. Right? That is different. It's not only more detailed in its description, right? It has a completely different flavor, right? So Tony, yeah, exactly. He's not just developing plot. Here he's doing world building, right? We have him investing this place with a sort of a richness of imaginative associations that it did not have before, right? And it's really neat to watch some of those details. Happening. And yeah, Tony, the ominousness of crow haunted, right? The word haunted, right? And of course, as you suggest, Tony, the carrion crows are awaiting prey, right? So there's something deeply ominous about that. Yeah. Megan, excellent. Megan Hambleton says that it's a safe place. That is, it's a strong refuge, right? But it's not a tame place, and it's also not a pleasant place, Megan, right? Yeah. And no, Kate, we cannot be sure whether the ancient hero belongs to Rohan. I mean, when he's called Heorulf, he probably belongs to Rohan because it's a very Anglo-Saxon name. Helm is a little bit more ambiguous, I think. Yeah. And John, yes, good point. John points out that Crow Haunted also has a kind of an ominous link back to Saruman, right? And Saruman's crows and Saruman's long spying out of the land, right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. More reports. "We have found many of our own folk lying slain as they fled thither," said the scout, and we have met scattered companies, going this way and that, leaderless. Some are making for the Clough," changed to making for Helm's Gate. "But it seems that not Helm," changed to Heorulf, "is not there. His plan was changed, and men do not know whither he has gone. Some say that Wormtongue was seen today. Some say that Wormtongue was seen in the evening going north, and in the dusk an old man on a great horse rode the same way." Okay, first of all, I love the reports of the scouts as they come in. Again, we get these same reports of the scouts later on, but the cumulative effect of the text as it's presented in this first draft is much more, I feel, it captures that sense of the fog of war, right? They don't know what's happening. They don't know where the enemy is. They don't know what the plans are. They're just hearing these reports, right? Is their guy, right? Is the West Marcher? Is he there? Is there an army there? Are they on their own? Has he already been defeated? They have no idea, right? All they know is that they're meeting scattered companies, and they keep hearing one thing and then another thing. Notice, by the way, the reference to an old man on a great horse riding the same way, right? Again, notice how richly, delightfully ambiguous that is, right? Wormtongue would not find that hard to explain either. See, look, where did he go? There went Gandalf, right? Gandalf left us behind in the dark, and where did he go? Straight to Isengard, right? Right? Showing his true colors. And what are his true colors? White wizard colors. That's what his true colors are, right? As if he didn't even hide that, right? I mean, again, it's the other guy's right. Wormtongue would not find it hard to explain, right? It certainly would not take a Wormtongue to be able to explain that. Tony, I have to admit, I can't help but think the same thing. Tony's wondering if not Helm is a private joke. I don't know. I found that hilarious. That was the part of this chapter that makes me laugh out loud. Calling him not Helm. So, Heorulf, he's either the hero of the ancient wars, or he's the current West Marcher, one or the other, and we keep waffling back and forth, right? But then we're thinking about naming the hero of the old wars Helm, so we're going to name the guy who lives there now not Helm, right? And I'm just like, okay, that's kind of fun, right? I like that. I'm sure that Tolkien probably has good reasons for that, but I It seems to me funny, Tony, but that might just be me. Yeah, no, see, Timothy, I know it has a meaning, right? I mean, I know it's not just a joke. I know it's not just a joke. But yeah, it's fun. It's still funny. I can't help it. It's still funny. I just have a puerile sense of humor, I suppose. The description of the Stansgulf. I miss the Stansgulf. Can we make a vote to replace Helm's Dyke with the Stansgulf? Because that's what I want. But anyway, soon they could hear harsh singing, and if they turned and looked back, they could see, winding up from the low country, red torches, countless points of fiery light. A very wood of trees must have been felled to furnish them. Every now and then a brighter blaze leaped up. "It is a great host," said Aragorn, "and follows us close." "They bring fire," said Éomer, "and are burning as they come all that they can kindle, rick and cot and tree. We shall have a great debt to pay them." "The reckoning is not far off," said Aragorn. "Shall we soon find ground where we can turn and stand?" "Yes," said Éomer. "Across the wide mouth of the combe, at some distance from Helm's Gate, there is a fall in the ground, so sharp and sheer that to those approaching, it seems as if they came upon a wall. This we call Stanshelf, or Stansgulf, changed somewhat disappointingly to Helm's Dyke. In places it is 20 feet high, and on the top it has been crowned with a rampart of great stones, piled in ancient days. There we will stand. Thither the other companies will also come. There are 3 ways that lead up through breaches in the cliff. These we must hold strongly." Okay. Let's see. So Megan, this is not the Deeping Wall. The Deeping Wall is behind. So in the book, in the published Helm's Deep, right? There's Helm's Dyke, and then there's the Deeping Wall, right? And the Deeping Wall is a constructed stone wall, right? A laid stone wall. It's one with the culvert under it that gets blown up, right? And then the Hornburg is right at one end of it, right? But the dike is a defense further down the way. It's basically this same thing, this cliff thing. But it doesn't have a rampart up on top of it. It's not that defensible, and it's quite long. So yes, Carrie, exactly. The dike is an enhanced natural barrier. It's called a trench and rampart in the published text. So trench suggests that they've actually dug it, right? So that it is in fact largely sort of man-made. Anyway, yeah. So anyhow. The Deeping Wall is a different thing, right? So you've got the dike in the front, and then the wall, and then the Hornburg sort of set up next to the wall, behind the wall. But it's not at the Deeping Wall that they're going to make their stand. It's at the Stansgulf, which I will call it, because that's so much fun. And so, yeah, Tony, what we get first is that this is really, it's a natural fortification, right? There's this wall, it's just like a cliff face that they're defending. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really fun. The other thing that I like the singing. Now, we get the singing in the text. Most of those details are there in the published text, but again, remember, first of all, they've been separated into companies. They are not with the king. Aragorn and Éomer and Legolas and Gimli are together. Legolas is the night-sighted one who has been guiding them, right? And Éomer is the one who is the guy with local knowledge, because he's been there many times before. So Éomer is able to guide them. Legolas is able to see for them, right? So it's Éomer and Legolas leading their company, and they're one of the first to get there, because, they're pretty good. And Legolas is pretty good night vision compared to compared to most of them. But remember, they've all separated. They don't know where the enemy is, and they don't know where the rest of their own squads are, right? They don't know where the rest of their own army is. Very fog of war, very sort of realistic fog of war. And what we get is this description of what they can see and hear. They can hear the harsh singing, which is the singing of the enemy, I believe, right? This is the singing of the wild men and the orcs. And they can see the red torches, the countless points of fiery light. In the published text, we get another sentence describing that in much more sort of beautiful detail. Again, that kind of helicopter view of the army on the move. Here instead, we get this sort of delightfully foreshadowy sentence about how a very wood... They had to have cut down like an entire wood to get as many torches as they would need to carry. Yeah. Aragorn's desire to find ground where we can turn and stand, and yes, there is going to be ground where they can stand. It was dark, starless and moonless when they came to the stone shelf, came to Helm's Dyke. Éomer led them up by a broad sloping path that climbed through a deep notch in the cliff and came out upon the new level some way behind the rampart. They were unchallenged. No one was there before them, friend or foe. At once Éomer set guards upon the breaches, changed to inlets. Ere long other companies arrived, creeping up the valley from various directions. There were wide grass slopes between the rampart and the stanrock. There they set their horses under such guards as could be spared from the manning of the wall. Gimli stood leaning against a great stone at a high point of the Standshelf changed to dike, not far from the inlet by which they had entered. Legolas was on the stone above, fingering his bow and peering into the darkness. Okay, so can you picture this? Right? Can you picture the Standshelf, the Stansgulf, as it's described here? So you've got this. So picture this wall, right? This natural cliff, but there are 3 gaps in it, and those gaps are sloped, so they're cut in to the cliff. The change from breaches to inlets, by the way, which he does consistently all through this section, Christopher interprets that as suggesting, which seems to be very plausible, that what Tolkien was trying to emphasize, these are not breaches, makes it sound like it's just a gap or like a hole or something like that. But inlets suggest they're built. These are constructed. They're not just natural places where the cliff fails, right? But rather there are 3 spots where ground has actually been cut into the cliff to make a slope or a stair in order to climb up past the cliff, right? So you don't scale the cliff to get up over it. You have to go through one of the inlets, which slopes up more gently, but you see how this makes it extra defensible, right? Because so you've got the cliff here and the cliff top here, right? But the inlet cuts in underneath the cliff and comes out, way up over here, right? Which means there's a cutting. You can throw stuff down on the people as they're coming up through the inlet, right? And that's how we're told that they fill it up with rocks. That's how you do it, right? You just chuck rocks down from the top so you can defend the face of the wall as they try to get up the face. And there are stone ramparts piled up on top of the rock to make it extra defensible and extra hard to get up. But also, as they try to force their way through the inlets, you can defend not only at the end, right, up on the upper shelf, the upper plane, but you can defend it all along the way by shooting or throwing rocks down into the inlets. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty fun, right? Yeah, exactly. Brian says breaches sounds like a flaw while an inlet is a feature. Yeah, exactly. Brian, the only thing I would say is that in retrospect, 3 was probably too many, right? Probably better to have only the one inlet, right? Would have made it a little easier to defend. So a little flaw on the part of the ancient folks who, constructed these defenses in the first place, but whatever. So there are 3 of them. It's the central, the center one, the north one, and the south one. And the company has come in through the central inlet, it seems, and there's Gimli standing on a great stone at a high point of the stone shelf, not far from the inlet by which they had entered. So there he is, standing up on top of the cliff, looking down. And these, of course, are the bones, the tough bones that this land has, right? And that actually really kind of, that line makes even more sense in this context. Then we get the coolest part, right? So the squads of the Rohirrim are coming, and they come and they find nobody there. The place is abandoned, right? So Heorulf, or whatever his name is, the West Marcher, isn't there, right? So they're on their own. So he's like, so Éomer's like, this is where we turn and stand. We're going to defend this spot right here. This is where we begin to take that reckoning. But the king hasn't come yet. Remember, they separated. So the king is in his own squad with his knights, and he has not shown up yet. And they can hear there's fighting in the distance. And so Éomer's going to take a squad of folks, and he's going to go back down to try to help the king and make sure that the king makes it up to the defenses. And he's about to go and about to leave Aragorn in charge, which is interesting, right? He doesn't appoint one of the other marshals. He's like, hey, Aragorn, you, like, stranger from abroad, right? I'm going to leave you in charge of the defenses. And Aragorn, very prudently, I think, disagrees. And he says, this errand I will take, said Aragorn. You are needed on the wall. And this seems to me very sensible, right? Yeah, because what happens if something happens if Éomer goes to rescue the king and both of them fall, right? That's imprudent for several reasons, right? First of all, Theodred's already dead, right? So if the king is in peril, how about we not send his heir, like, with a small, if the king has been ambushed with a small group of people, let's not send the heir with another small group of people to go try to bail him out. How about we leave the heir up behind the wall in command of the rest of the army, right? Maybe we should do that. But what's more, I mean, Aragorn in command, I mean, sure, it's not that Aragorn is incapable and stuff, but is everybody involved going to be cool with that, right? I think Aragorn recognizes you are needed on the wall, right? He has not really had time to earn the trust of the common men in the army, right, in order to have him be actually in command. Yeah, exactly, Megan. They need somebody that they know. And anyway, this errand, I'm going to go rescue the king with a small group of people. Yeah, he feels pretty well equipped for that, right? Come, Legolas, your eyes will serve us. He sped down the slope. Where Legolas goes, I go, said Gimli, and ran after them. That's totally like on Gimli's, Twitter description. Anyway, the watchers on the wall saw nothing for a while. Then suddenly there were louder cries and wilder yells. A clear voice rang, echoing in the hills. Elendil! It seemed that far below in the shadows a white flame flashed. Branding goes to war at last, said Éomer. Remember, that's the name of the sword, still called branding. A horseman appeared before the main breach and was admitted. Where is Theoden king? Asked Éomer. Among his guard, said the man, but many are unhorsed. We rode into an ambush, and orcs sprang out of the ground among us, hamstringing many of our steeds. Snowmane and the king escaped, for that horse is night-sighted, and sprang over the heads of the orcs. But Theoden dismounted and fought among his guard. Heorulfs sang a song that has long been silent. I love that sentence. Oh man, Heorulfs sang a song that has long been silent. Oh man, that is on my short list of favorite sentences that are cut out of The Lord of the Rings. Holy cow. Anyway, right. Okay, Aragorn is with them, and he sends word that a great host of orcs is on his heels. Man the wall. He will come in by the main breach if he can. Yeah. First of all, how lovely is it to get to know Snowmane a little bit better, right? Snowmane and his exceptional night vision. Snowmane, who alone escaped of all of the horses of the king's guard by springing over the heads of the orcs, right? But then Theoden dismounts and comes back to fight among his guard who have been unhorsed, right? So he's going to dismount and fight on foot among them just because they're dismounted. I mean, that's awesome, right? So we get extra awesome detail of Snowmane, and then so that we're not meeting him for the first time in the Battle of Pelennor Field, and we've got Theoden acting, not just bravely, but heroically and nobly. And absolutely, James, significant horsemanship on Theoden's part too, to leap over the heads of the orcs, but then turn around and come back, right? And then here comes Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli on foot to help to rescue everybody. This detail is really this skirmish, right? The ambush of the king. In the published book, Theoden, until his final charge, Theoden's whole time at Helm's Deep is kind of boring, right? I mean, that is for him, right? He shows up and he goes into the Hornburg and he watches the whole battle from a distance, and he never sees any action until he decides he's going to charge, right? Which is awesome, and that's great and everything. But this is really cool. This is super fun. But wait, it gets even better. Oh my goodness. So the king's men are starting to come back, right? Through the main breach. They're starting to come in through the main breach, but the army is coming in right behind them. The orcs are right there. At that moment, there was a wild cry. Orcs were attacking the breaches, changed to inlets, on either hand, and before the king had been brought into safety out of the darkness, there sprang a host of dark shapes, driving towards the great breach. A white fire shone. There in the path could be seen for a moment Aragorn, son of Arathorn. On his one side was Gimli, on the other Legolas. "Back now, my comrades," cried Aragorn. "I will follow." Even as Gimli and Legolas ran back towards the rampart, he leaped forward. Before the flame of branding, the orcs fled. Then slowly Aragorn retreated, walking backward. Even as he did so, step by step, one great orc came forward, while the others stalked behind him. As Aragorn turned at last to run up the inlet, the orc sprang after him, but an arrow whined and he fell sprawling and lay still. For some time no others dared to draw near. "Sure is the shaft of the elven bow, and keen are the eyes of Legolas," said Aragorn, as he joined the elf, and they ran together to the rampart. I know, Brandon, how epic is this, right? Oh my goodness, this image of the whole army of orcs is charging up to the wall, and they're alone. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli as rear guard while the king is escaping right behind them. And then Aragorn tells Legolas and Gimli to go, and he charges. And Aragorn alone charging downhill against the entire army of orcs charging uphill. And they scatter. They run, right? I mean, oh man, this is incredible. Yeah, Yana, this absolutely is Aragorn's "you shall not pass" moment. Yes. Oh my goodness. I just don't even know what else to say. This scene is so cool. Oh, this whole sequence. I really just loved it. I really love it. Now, of course, we're not going to lose this. Naturally, we're not going to completely lose this, right? As Tolkien almost never totally cuts anything, right? So, of course, you'll remember the sequence here is very like the sequence that we're going to get when they're returning up from the deeps, right? After the blasting fire and the enemies in the deep, and Legolas and Aragorn, remember, is the last one up the stairs, and Legolas, shoots the orc that's just about to pounce on him and stuff. It's that scene is drawn right from is this moment kind of transformed, but man, it is not the same effect. This is just incredible. And then Nancy, another awesome Snowmane moment, right? Thus at last the king's host was brought within the fastness, and turned to bay before the mouth of Helm's Deep. The night was not yet old, and many hours of darkness and peril yet remained. Theoden was unhurt, but he grieved for the loss of so many of the horses of his guard, and he looked upon Snowmane bleeding at the shoulder. A glancing arrow had struck him. Fair is the riding forth, friend, he said, but often the road is bitter. Grieve not for Snowmane, lord, said Aragorn. The hurt is light. I will tend it, with such skill as I have, while the enemy still holds off. They have suffered losses more grievous than ours, and will suffer more if they dare to assail this place. Man, so not only we get the grieving of the king, but he grieved for the loss of so many, what of his knights, so many of his men, no, so many of the horses, right? The poor hamstrung horses. That's who he's grieving for. And then there's, boom, the hands of the king, right? The hands of the king, and the hands of a hero are healing Snowmane, right? Here's the king worried about Snowmane, and here's, Aragorn, who is just as good at healing horses as he is at healing hobbits. Oh, I mean, come on. How cool is this stuff? I guess I can see why he cut some of these things, but, I don't know. Yeah. Anyhow, let's keep going. Now, this is where the narrative kind of shifts, right? Tolkien gets excited and leaps ahead of this, right? He leaps ahead of sort of the narrative flow by shifting into outline mode, right? And we've seen him do this before when the ideas really start to sort of tumble along, right? So he shifts to outline mode. There is an attack. Endless numbers, grappling hooks, ladders, piled slain. Riders block breaches with stones from high places and with bodies. Orcs keep on getting in. By the way, and with bodies, I think this means, of course, the bodies of those that they have killed down below. I wonder if it also means the bodies of those who have come up on the cliff that they have killed, and they're chucking the bodies down, too. Orcs keep on getting in. Riders lose few men, most at breaches. Orcs once got near the horses late in the night, because remember the horses are up, but they're in front of the deeping wall, but they're behind the stone shelf, right? Late in the night, the waning moon shone fitfully, and the defenders see a boiling throng beneath the wall. Slowly the dead were piling up. Wild men in steel mesh forced the north breach, and turning south began to drive men from the rampart. Orcs clamber over. Dawn sees the men of Rohan giving way all along. The horses are taken away to Helm's Deep with the king. They make a shield wall and retreat slowly up towards the Stanrock. So they've been driven back, their defenses have been taken, so they form a shield wall, and they're slowly withdrawing back. And that sense of the rising tide of the orcs, right? They've put up this amazing defense. They've killed heaps and heaps and heaps of the enemy, such that the piles of the dead have themselves become defensive fortifications, right? And yet the enemy has still managed to not quite overwhelm them, right? But to finally reach the top of the wall. But there they are, not in retreat, right? There's no rout as they form a shield wall and slowly, step by step, are retreating up towards Helm's. They're not even up at the Hornburg, which is not called the Hornburg yet, right? They're not even up to Helm's Deep, to the main wall, right? They're retreating up towards that, and they're not even going to get that because it's going to be dawn soon. The sun comes out, and then all stare, defenders and attackers. A mile or so below the dike, from north to south in a great crescent, they behold a marvel. Men rubbed their eyes, thinking that they dreamed or were dizzy with wounds and weariness. Where all had been upland and grass-clad slopes, there stood withered leaves. And like ancient oaks with tangled boughs and gnarled pines stood dark among them. The orcs gave back. The wild men wavered, crying in terrified voices, for they came from under the wood, under the west sides of the misty mountains. At that moment from the Stanrock a trumpet sounded. Forth rode Theoden with his guard, and a company of Heorulfs men. They charged down, crashing into the wild men, and driving them back in ruin over the cliffs. Wizardry is abroad, said something men. So just to make sure everybody remembers, I know those of you who have been following the series will know this already, but for those of you who are new, the square brackets with the question mark at the beginning, it means Christopher can't be sure what the word is. It's a manuscript word that's almost illegible, and he's guessing at what might possibly be, but he's not sure. When he just leaves dots is when he can't even give a safe guess. What can this betoken? Wizardry, maybe, said Éomer, but it seems not to be any device of our enemies. See how dismayed they are. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Carrie, you're right. Carrie is comparing the reference to the cutting down of the forest to make torches to the unfired pistol on stage, right? As we finally turn back to the revenge of the wood who has come. There is a reckoning, right? Think about how those references come together, right? There is a reckoning, but it is not just a reckoning to be exacted by the men of Rohan, but there is shockingly, surprisingly, a reckoning that is dealt out by the forest from whom all those torches were cut, right? That's pretty cool. Notice also, so the of Heorulf's men possibility there. Theoden's charge. So remember, the king was taken in. So as the shield wall is formed, all of the Rohirrim, all of Theoden's, the remnant of Theoden's army here, and remember, not many of them have died, right? And it's said that they're being pushed back, but there have been few casualties. How is it that he put it? What does he say? I'm forgetting there. Yeah, riders lose few men, most at breaches. Yeah, so some are killed at the breaches, at the inlets, but there aren't many. So this is not a great slaughter of the Rohirrim, right? It's just the overwhelming of their defensive fortification. But as they're being pushed back, so the horses are sent inside, and the king with them, right? So the king and the horses are on the inside. So the effect that we create here, right, is two things at once. The dawn comes, and there are two sudden and unexpected strokes. All of the defenders are still currently engaged with the orcs, right? They're forming the shield wall, right? So reinforcements really did not seem in the cards, right? And then all of a sudden, the valley behind them is full of a forest that wasn't there the day before, right? And that's really freaky. And then forth rode Theoden with his guard and a company of Heorulf's men. I think that the point of it being a company of Heorulf's men is it's like unexpected reinforcements, right? So there's presumably Aragorn, Éomer, Gimli, Legolas, Hama, and all the rest of them are still fighting in the shield wall, right? And then here comes Theoden, whom they thought we kept Theoden safe in with the horses, right? And now here he comes charging out with extra guys, right? Who were, I guess, hanging out up there in the tower, right? Because they never even made it. Like Éomer and they haven't even been to the tower. They didn't make it that far. They just made it as far as the stun shelf and have been holding off the enemy from there. We get the kind of W catastrophe, right? The sudden and unexpected assault of Theoden leading a charge with men that they didn't even know that they had, and coming down from the top, and then of course the forest in the valley, the wizardry, and again even the whole fog of war thing, right? This sense of Wizardry is abroad. What can this betoken? They don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? And that moment of doubt, like everyone's freaked out, but it's not obvious that this is a good thing that's happened here. All these ancient oaks with tangled boughs and gnarled pines standing darkly among them. That might not be good, right? But Éomer points out this is clearly not a device of our enemies, right? They are extremely dismayed. Okay, a couple notes that Tolkien goes on to write. Their horses were often night-sighted, that is, the Rohirrim's horses, but the men were not so night-sighted as the orcs. Rohan at a disadvantage in dark. As soon as it grows light, they are able to fight. The orcs are no match for the horsemen on the slopes before the Stanrock. Sorties from Helm's Deep and Stanrock. Orcs dive back over the wall. It is then that the wood is seen. Orcs trapped, trees grab them, and the wood is full of Heorulf's folk. Gandalf has collected the wanderers, about 500. Hardly any of the attackers escape, so hopelessness turns to victory. Meanwhile, Heorulf, told by Gandalf to hold the something road, something or other, another force sent something Eodoras. This is now caught between Heorulf and the victorious forces of the king. In a battle on the plain, something, terror struck by Aragorn and Gandalf. The host, not wishing to rest, rides down the fleeing remnant back towards Isengard. Okay. Yeah. So notice the first point that he makes here. This is a revision already, right? His first impulse of how to change that first scene that he described, that is the dawn scene, right? Is that he wants to delay first the seeing of the forest by the orcs, right? Which makes sense because they have their backs to it, right? They're looking up. It's the defenders looking down who are going to be first aware of the forest, right? That makes perfect sense. So notice what he wants to do. What he wants to do is to have a turning of the tide of battle at dawn, right? And his reason for this is quite, well, mundane, I guess, right? Just simply, the orcs see way better than the Rohirrim in the dark. So when the dawn comes, the Rohirrim have the advantage, right? Because they can see better now. And of course, if you think about it, remember this is not only just being fought in a defensible position, but it's being fought on a steep slope. Even up behind the stone shelf is a pretty steep slope, right? So they're fighting downhill. That's a really big advantage. So now they attack and they drive the orcs down. So we're picturing even before the orcs even realize that the forest is there, they're already driven down past the Stanrock again, past the Stanrock is where the tower is, the Stan Shelf, right? The Stan Skulf. And the orcs dive back over the wall. That deeping dike, right? The Helm's Dike, rather. And that's when they see that. So it's only after they have been put to flight from the upper level of the defenses, after the Rohirrim have gained back all of the ground that they have lost at the end of the night, that the orcs realize that yes, Mike, that Birnam Wood has in fact risen and come to High Dunsinane Hill. That's exactly what happened. So it's one of the effects, therefore, of this shift. One of the directions that he's thinking about pushing it here right away is essentially to make the final turn in the battle slightly less dramatic, slightly less catastrophic, slightly less we're just about to all be killed until we're suddenly rescued, right? The men of Rohan start to win. Now, it's still kind of hopeless. I mean, there's still so many of the enemy that it's not like they're really going to win. They can't keep it up for long enough. They're going to be overwhelmed in time. So it's still down to the trees, for saving them. But But it's it is interesting that they make this shift. I want to make sure something slightly weird seemed to have happened there for a second with my internet connection. I just want to make sure everything. Can you guys hear me all right? You guys still getting me okay? Wanted to just check and make sure that you are okay. Good. Just wanted to check. I had a couple weird things going on now. So great, excellent. All right, but wait. We get a little bit more here. Another passage that I kind of miss. So this is just one of those, as he's going through and revising now, Christopher's just giving us stray paragraphs and stuff, not giving us the full text of the newer versions, the newer layers of this. But here's a fascinating passage. Aragorn was away behind the defences, tending the wound in Snowmane's shoulder and speaking gentle words to the horse. As the fragrance of Athelas rose in the air, his mind went back to the defence on Weathertop and to the escape from Moria. It is a long journey, he said to himself. From one hopeless corner we escape, but to find another more desperate. Yet alas, Frodo, I would be happier in heart if you were with us in this grim place. Where now do you wander? What a fascinating moment this is, right? A pause in the middle of the battle, and we find Aragorn reflecting, not just reflecting back over their journey, but thinking about Frodo. We never see Aragorn thinking about Frodo, right? And yeah, isn't it interesting? It's a little bit funny, right? That he kind of would wish that Frodo be trapped in desperate battle, right? I mean, here they are all penned in and very likely all to be killed. And he's like, I wish I would be happier if Frodo were with me. And I think the force of that is to show that, like, although he's, tolerably concerned about their odds here in the battle, he's even more worried about Frodo. The doubt, the uncertainty, and I think this, again, thinking of the big context, right? They were in a bad place on Weathertop. They were in a bad place in Moria, right? They barely escaped from each one, right? The first time from the attack of the Ringwraiths, the second time from the attack of the Balrog. Now they're being cornered again by a seemingly insurmountable foe. We've escaped from, one hopeless corner after another, right? Throughout this journey, we keep finding ourselves in another more desperate. But what might Frodo be going through, right? Yeah. He still does desire to protect the bearer, Carrie. I agree. And yeah, Veronica, it does sound almost like, I don't know that I would necessarily say that he's second guessing his decision at the Anduin, but sort of regretting that it had to happen, I think, right? Yeah. Anyway, really cool moment. Okay, so subsequent revisions, Tolkien decides to change the battle plan. And look, I still love the published Battle of Helm's Deep. It's still one of my favorite parts in the books. I always have. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. But I'm gonna miss the Stanskjolf because I love the stand there and the inlets and everything. I think it's fantastic, and I loved the description, and I will never not regret the fact that we don't get that incredible scene of Aragorn holding back the army single-handedly. But anyway, it's okay. New plan. Éomer and Aragorn decide that they cannot hold dike in dark without archers. The dike is over 2 miles long. The main host and king go to Stanrock. The horses are led to the deep. Aragorn and Éomer, with a few men, their horses ready in rear, hold the inlets as long as they dare. These they block with stones rolled from the rampart. The assault on the inlets soon drives in as the orcs clamber up rampart in between. Ladders? Wild men drive in from north of the deep, where a high stone wall was built. added here, but at the same time, breastwork crowned with stones. Here Gimli speaks his words. Reduced description of Helm's dyke. It is not fortified. Orcs boil round foot of the Stanrock. Then describe the assault as above. Orcs piling up over the wall. Wild men climb on the goblins' dead bodies. Moon something or other. Men fighting on the wall top. Disadvantage of the riders. The wall taken and Rohan driven back into the gorge. Dawn, Aemir, and Aragorn go to the Stanrock to stand by the king in the tower. Okay, so let's look at some of the points of difference here. First, so the fundamental change is that they're not going to defend the dike at all, right? We're shifting the battle. It's not just that they're going to lose more quickly. I mean, that is what's going to happen. But the point is that the main battle that happened, the main description of the battle and the defense is going to move from the dike back up to the wall, back up to the deeping wall. So instead, we're just gonna overwhelm the dike. Now, I don't know which way this goes, right? That is, which way the decision process leading to that first paragraph went. Did Tolkien decide, I'd really rather have them defending the wall than this dike? Like, does he think that this dike is kind of too quaint? It doesn't seem epic enough, or I don't even know why. Like, he decides that he would prefer to have them defending a proper wall, right? And have the main battle take place at a proper wall rather than at this sort of natural cliff. I don't know what, too rustic? I have no idea what the rationale was. So maybe he decides, I want it at the wall and not at the dike, so I'm gonna find a reason why they can't defend that dike. So I'm gonna reduce the description of it. I'm gonna make it not fortified, right? It's just a cliff. And there's breaches in it, and it's not going to hold them back. And I'm going to make it long. I'm going to make it 1 or 2 miles long, so they can't possibly have enough men to defend that entire way, especially since there are breaches in it. And as we see, since it's so wide and they can't defend every point, the orcs are just going to climb over it, right? And so there's really no way of defending it consistently. So again, the decision can go in one of 2 ways. Either he decides, I don't want to defend the dike, I want to defend the wall, so I'm going to find some reasons why they can't defend the dike, and I'm going to dispose of it. I'm not going to dispose of it, I'm going to get rid of it, but I'm going to not make it the chief point of defense. Or does he go the other way? Does he decide, hang on a second, this doesn't make sense, because if this dike goes across this whole opening, the opening has to be at least a mile wide, right? I mean, the opening to this valley is not, I mean, I don't know about you, but I was picturing, when I was picturing that battle at the Stanskylf as it was described in that first draft, I was picturing something maybe, at most 100 yards across, right? Not a mile wide. Right. So I think that it is possible that the choice to abandon the dike and move back to the wall is precipitated by his thinking through the geography. And right, as the deep is narrowing up towards the top, it makes it easier to defend with fewer men the farther in you go. So it's moved back from the dike and to the wall. That makes more sense. Maybe it was the geography that led to it. Maybe it was just that he ended up deciding he really wanted a wall instead of a cliff to defend. I don't really as I say, I don't know which way the direction goes. But one way or the other, that's the choice that he makes. And so Gimli's words about there being strong bones to this land is shifted from him talking about the actual stones of the mountain, right, in the cliff face that they're defending, to the stones with which the walls were built, upon which he is now standing when he says that. But of course, we're still going to preserve the descriptions of the bodies and the wild men climbing over the goblins' dead bodies, right? That's fairly gruesome. Notice the other change, right? The other change is that at dawn, Aemir and Aragorn are going to go to the Stanrock to stand by the king in the tower. Again, remember, that's a shift because instead of having the king come in as the king being a eucatastrophe to Aragorn and Aemir, who were still in the shield wall, right? And then all of a sudden the king comes charging down with the horses and some extra dudes, right, behind them. They are going to go up to him, and so we're going to have it looks like a more concerted charge by all of the Rohirrim down now, which again makes more sense because now they're charging out of a wall, right, through a gate out of a wall, rather than just down from the wall behind and through the inlets in the cliffs. Okay, or actually just to the cliffs is all they did before. So now we get the second version of the dawn. They see the sunlight. They see in the sunlight the wonder of the wood. Charge of Theoden. Éomer left, Aragorn right. So here we have the clear, like the whole army with those three leaders sweeping down the hillside. With day, fortunes change. Uncertain about the manuscript there, but that's what it seems like it says. So again, we have this emphasis on, remember it was there in that previous slide too, about the inadequate night vision of the Rohirrim, right? Men issue on horses, but the host is vast, only it is disconcerted by the wood. Almost the watchers could believe it had moved up the valley as the battle raged. It almost looks like that thing's moving, right? Trees should come right up to the dike. In the midst, out rides Gandalf from the wood, and rides through the orcs as if they were rats and crows. I love that sentence. I don't think that sentence is really going to be in the book as this is an outline, right? But it's a great image. Yes, it does describe the orcs as carrion eaters, Mike. But that image, Gandalf riding through the orcs as if they were rats and crows, and Gandalf emerging from the wood. The people that he is leading, the people of Heorulf, the West Marchers, that he has rallied and which he brings in as reinforcements, are coming through the wood here, which is kind of cool. All right, I'm going to let you go soon, but let's end with this. Yeah, let's end with this. I have 2 more slides, but we can carry those over to next time. Carrie, that's a really great point, that image of Gandalf. She says, on the white horse with the bright dawn from the dark wood and through the black host. Yeah, the lights and shadows. You get the white. Even the fact that Shadowfax is not exactly white, but more silver or shadowy, right? Makes Gandalf himself shine the brighter. But then you have the dark, the orcs being like crows, right? So you've got like rats and crows. So you got the darkness of them, the darkness under the wood, and then and him riding out and shining on his horse. Lots of really great light imagery. Okay. Well, speaking of epic stuff, now with a great cry, a company of the wild men moved forward. Among them, they bore the trunk of a great tree. We now have a battering ram. We need a battering ram. We didn't need a battering ram before because we had no gates in a cliff. Right now we have gates in the wall, and so we're ramming a gate. The orcs crowded about them. The tree was swung by many strong hands and smote the timbers with a boom. At that moment there was a sudden call. Among the boulders upon the flat and narrow rim beneath the fastness and the brink, a few brave men had lain hidden. Aragorn was their leader. Up now, he shouted. Out, branding, out! A blade flashed like white fire. Elendil, he shouted, and his voice echoed in the cliffs. See, said Éomer. Branding has gone to war at last. Why am I not there? We were to have drawn blades together. None could withstand the onset of Aragorn or the terror of his sword. The orcs fled. The hillmen were hewn down, or fled, leaving their ram upon the ground. The rock was cleared. Then Aragorn and his men turned to run back within the gates while there was yet time. His men had passed within, when again the lightning flashed. Thunder crashed. From among the fallen at the top of the causeway, 3 huge orcs sprang up. The white hand could be seen on their shields. Men shouted warning from the gates, and Aragorn for an instant turned. At that moment, the foremost of the orcs hurled a stone. It struck him on the helm, and he stumbled, falling to his knee. The thunder rolled. Before he could get up and back, the 3 orcs were upon him. Man, the 3 orcs were upon him. And here's poor Aragorn struck on the helm, right, falling to his knee, right? Here's Aragorn like in the concussion protocol while the 3 orcs are pouncing on him from behind. And this, of course, is the moment where Gimli's going to do his Baruch Hazad thing and come out and rescue Aragorn. This scene very similar to the one that we get in the published text, but it's much more in so many ways. Look not only at the facts of the case, right? Éomer isn't there, it's just Aragorn, right? Aragorn with only a small group of men. And once again, Aragorn is last, standing alone, the last to go back into the gates after everyone is in. And now he's ambushed. Now the orc reaches him, right? And he's pounced on by 3 orcs, and he's been hit in the head, right? And it looks, everything is, and then he's rescued by Gimli. But it's not just the facts of things, right? It's also the description. Think back to when Éomer is of course it's Éomer in the published text, who is with, in fact, Aragorn, and does, in fact, get to draw their blades together. But he's the one who gets tackled by hidden orcs and pounced upon by 3 orcs, who are then slain by Gimli. The first 3 orcs that Gimli slays in the Battle of Helm's Deep. But think of what we don't get. We don't get his men had passed within when again the lightning flashed, thunder crashed, right? The thunder rolling later on, like the crash of the it's so much more dramatic. It's so much more compellingly present a scene, whereas the scene as described at the Battle of Helm's Deep in the book is much more distant, right? Is much more kind of, I was going to say objective, but that's not exactly quite right. Much more distant. The narrator is much more distant from it. There's an immediacy, there's a kind of drama to this, which is much more present and compelling than the drama that we get in many of those situations, many of the descriptions of the action at the Battle of Helm's Deep in the book, which is kind of an interesting choice. All right, keeping you late now, and I shouldn't do that, so I'm going to let you guys go. Look at that, I got through 18 slides tonight, not too bad. I still have just a couple left, but not too many. That's fine. Let's see, who's the next one? Oh yeah, we'll save that one for next time. Talking about the language of the Westfold. So we'll do that next time. Okay, so next couple chapters for next time, and we'll finish those up. Thank you, everybody. We're going to, we will have class next week. I will be here next week. I'm going to be away the week after that. So we'll have class next week and then off the week after that. And then I'll be back in March, first week of March. So I will see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks, everybody. Bye now. The Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at Signum University.